Welcome to the Superhero Bibliophiles podcast. This is the companion show to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast, where instead of talking about movies or TV shows, we talk about comics and graphic novels, all the things that inspired the movies and TV shows we like to discuss. And today we are talking about a very interesting, very controversial book, which is Three Jokers. And joining me to discuss that is Tyler Patrick. Tyler, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thank you very much for having me, especially to talk about this book, because I don't get to talk about Batman as much as I'd like to, or just other comics as much. And when you brought this up, I was really excited because, and we'll get into it, but it was just, I think it's a book that can be really reevaluated. And I think it's a book that suffers from preconceived ideas.
Yeah, it's an interesting book, and we'll jump into it like you said. But the impetus for this was you were on, I think you were, I was listening to you on Digging for Kryptonite, and you had mentioned this, and you had mentioned that it was a book that you didn't like at first, but then you revisited it, and you looked at it in a different way, and you really sort of came around on it. And I had read it a while back when the trade first came out, is when I think I first read it, and it was okay. I think was kind of my reaction. I didn't really have too strong an opinion of it either one way or the other. I think ultimately I landed on it was just kind of underwhelming given all the buildup. And
Mm.
but when I heard you say that, it made me want to revisit it again. And I had just started to this part of the podcast, so I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to revisit it, to have Tyler on to talk about something. So yeah, let's see if we can do this. And here we are. But before we jump too much into Three Jokers, why don't you tell people a little bit about who you are?
My name's, like you said, Tyler Patrick. I'm the host of the Krypton Report podcast. We talk mainly about Superman, of course, Supergirl with the film coming up. But it's basically a DC podcast focused on Superman, but we do touch on other characters, especially in like film and things like that. We review any DC movies, and I've been doing that now for 10 years. 2026 is our 11th year. So it's pretty crazy. I've been doing it that long, but it's fun.
Very cool. And what kind of stuff has been catching your interest lately? Anything that's not necessarily for the podcast, but just in general, anything you've been watching or reading or anything like that?
I did. Okay, so since we're doing Three Jokers, I did do a big Ghost Machine read. Ghost Machine being the company that Geoff Johns is part of through what do you call it?
Is that through
What I just
Image?
Yes. Sorry, I blanked. Yeah, yeah. And Jason Fabok, of course. They did a book called Rook, and I just kind of caught up. I found their book Hyde Street very, very interesting. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole on there because I do think, everything aside, Geoff Johns is an amazing writer. So I did a big comics read on that. Um, as far as like watching things, I don't know when this will go up, but the new season of Bridgerton came out. So of course, my wife, we woke up at 3 a.m. to watch that, the first half because she was like, "We're doing it." I was like, "All right, fine." So that's been fun. There hasn't been a show that I've really dug into in a little while. Like there's been some that I'm rewatching Superman and Lois because I did recently get to meet Tyler Hecklin, and I was like, man, I really want to rewatch the show straight. I'm in season 2, just kind of getting a refill for that. And I mean, that's really like I haven't done a whole lot of deep like watching of anything, as much as I'd like to.
Well, we are recording this right at the beginning of February, and for my part, I just finished watching Wonder Man on Disney Plus,
Okay,
and
don't say too much. Me and Solomon, because we were in the first episode. He wanted to watch it with me, but we've been so busy this week playing catch up because of the snowstorm that I haven't finished it. But he was interested in watching it. So I'll
I'm not.
listen to whatever you say, but I'm not. I just
Yeah, I'm not going to spoil anything, so don't worry about that. I will say though, if you or your son are expecting, more of a traditional superhero show, it doesn't become that. So just, go in with that, with your expectation. Make sure your son's expectations are set appropriately if he's expecting like some, big superhero action or something like that.
I don't know what
Uh,
I think we're really just digging like just the beginning. Like we said, we're in the first episode, and like we don't really, I don't have it. Like I told him, I was like, we don't really have any expectations. I think I like Yaya as an actor, and I'm just digging him right now as just being him, you
yeah,
know?
it's basically that throughout the whole series. Like, and it's a cool idea because they're taking this. And this is one of the things that I think that Disney Plus is a good vehicle for is to not necessarily do these big long shows with these superhero characters, but instead do these kind of like unique little things that you can't really do on the big screen. Because I don't you
Mhm.
this would not have been able to be done as a movie. I don't think. I think if you would nobody if anyone had pitched this to Disney and been like, "Hey, let's do this big budget movie based about a an actor in a superhero world," basically, I think every Disney execs would be like, "What the hell are you talking about? We are not going to waste money on that." Um, but doing it on Disney Plus is a really cool idea. So gives you this idea to explore a different aspect of the MCU, and how people react to stuff within the superhero setting, where there are these people with powers and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool. Also, just Yahya Abdul Mateen and Ben Kingsley are incredible together. They've got amazing chemistry. Their relationship really drives the whole show. And I was one of the people who was very disappointed by Iron Man 3 and the Mandarin reveal, because I thought from the previews and the first half of that movie, Ben Kingsley was absolutely killing it at this kind of
Yes.
unique take on the Mandarin. And then when they got to the Trevor reveal, I was so annoyed. Um, and then we got the All Hail the King one shot, which started to set things up in a better direction. I'm like, okay, I don't think we'll ever see anything else of that. Then we got Shang-Chi, and of course we got a very cool take on the Mandarin in that, and I love what they did there. And surprisingly brought Trevor back. And I really started digging him in that. And then this just elevates him to another level. He's so much fun to
I
watch
feel like
in this series.
you mentioned Iron Man 3. I feel like it's really the MCU movie that has no weight
Yeah.
because okay, and we won't go down this rabbit hole, but the whole extremist thing, if Tony solved it for Pepper, wouldn't that be the first thing you would have went to repair Rhodey's spine?
Hmm.
When he gets paralyzed, and then the whole purpose of that film holds no weight when you start Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
There's nothing that carries over. Even the Trevor part, you could almost have not seen Iron Man 3 to enjoy Trevor.
Honestly, whenever I do a MCU rewatch marathon, I usually leave Iron Man 3 out because it is the one that has like no bearing on anything else.
Right. His whole arc in that is, I mean, even having his reactor in his chest taken out, you kind of don't even need later on when he has the thing on
Mhm.
him. Like you don't even think about it. So I can see where if Shane Black was just trying to end a trilogy, it made sense, giving some sort of closure. But with the way the MCU just keeps going, like it doesn't have any weight and it's kind of a wasted potential. But
Yeah, I think a big part of that was just also the uncertainty at the time, because that was the last movie in Downey's contract, and there were apparently some question over whether or not they would, because after he'd become such a big star, there's some question over whether or not Disney was going to want to keep him around. So I think
obviously,
Shane Black, yeah, so I think Black had some marching orders to just kind of like make it so that this can both be a way to close the book, but also leave something open going forward. So I think that was kind of the whole idea behind that. And so that's why when we get to Age of Ultron, and they kind of like hand wave this in Civil War when he says that, I blew up all my suits for her, but then, we had to finish mopping up Shield, we had to finish mopping up Hydra and all that kind of stuff. So they kind of like did like a hand wavy thing to explain like why he kept coming back and settle on this idea of like he really liked being Iron Man and he didn't want to stop, so he
Yep.
kept finding excuses to keep it going, which was okay, but it wasn't. But yeah, within the context of Iron Man 3, it definitely feels like that movie doesn't really have much of a reason for being anymore.
I did recently I sat and I read the entire leaked Kang Dynasty script.
Oh, I didn't even
Um
know that that had leaked.
yeah, that a few months back and I had it and I just never got to read it. It was like the first draft that they had turned in. So I sat down and I read that just out of curiosity. Um it was pretty interesting. I think
I'll
it'd
have
be fun
to.
to do a whole special or something if I can find someone else who would read it and just do like a whole conversation based on that thing. Um,
I'm gonna have to look into that. Yeah. That's definitely something I got to make a note of. Okay, very cool. The other thing that I got started getting interested in lately is The Shield, or getting reinterested in. Did you ever watch the show with Michael Chiklis
no,
back on
I
FX?
didn't. It was one that I wanted to, but it just came out that time where I was in college, and if it wasn't something I was grabbing like on DVD, I wasn't watching it.
Yeah, this was this period. I started getting into it originally when Netflix first began, back when it was the DVD, the mail order DVDs. And so I had heard about the FX shows that were really kind of getting people's attention back then. So it was The Shield, it was Nip Tuck. I think there was another show as well that people were talking about a lot back then, but I'm having blanking on it right now. Um, but but I remember
I did.
watch. Sorry, go ahead.
I did watch Sons of Anarchy.
Sons of
Rescue
Anarchy,
Me.
I came to later. Rescue Me was another one that I was going to, but I never got around to checking out. But The Shield and Nip Tuck, I definitely got really into, and at least for those first season or two, and then it just kind of like I started fading off a little bit from there. But so I don't know, I just had the urge to rewatch it lately, so I started rewatching it, and I got drawn in like right away, man. Like it's really compelling stuff, and I'm like almost finished the first season now, and it's really cool to go back and revisit it.
It's cool. Like I think it's fun to find some of those shows that you just kind of missed like that. Like one that I've been wanting to go back to because everyone talks about being like one of the best shows is The Wire.
That's one that I've got to watch. It's on my list. Yeah.
Yep. And like last year, my friend and I did a whole series watch of The Sopranos because everyone's like, The Sopranos is so great. And we both kind of always like, oh. And then when Penguin came out and everyone kind of compared it to The Sopranos, we're like, okay. So we watched it and I was like, it was okay. Like it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't as great as people made it up to be.
Yeah, that's another one that's also on my list. The Sopranos and The Wire. I've got both of them, and it's just another one where I just gotta sit down and make the time to watch them. But anyway, enough TV talk. So today, as we said, we are talking about Three Jokers, and this all began back during the Dark Side War, when all the heroes get like the new gods powers, and Batman especially, he gets Metron's powers, and he ends up sitting on the Mobius chair, and he's kind of like testing it out. So he's testing out like this idea of like he has access to unlimited knowledge. So he first asks, who kills his parents, and the chair tells him Joe Chill. And then he asks what the Joker's real name is, and then he's very shocked by the results. And he's like, and then later we find out that the Mobius chair told him that there were actually three Jokers. And he said that he was going to have to look into it later. And then it just kind of was left open for a long time until finally Three Jokers ended up coming out. And this was kind of I guess you could say it's kind of a companion to Doomsday Clock, which is also another
Yes.
book that,
Thank you. I was like, I feel like we can't talk about this without mentioning Doomsday Clock. So thank you.
yeah. And I don't like and both of them got very negative reactions. And for me, I know you said that you dig Johns as a writer. I've always kind of been like he's kind of hit or miss with me. Like I came to him not through his DC stuff, but through Marvel, when he
Hmm.
followed up Kurt Busiek on Avengers, and he did a really excellent, very, I still maintain, incredibly underrated and relatively short run on the book. It was between it was the last of what I call the good Avengers before we entered the dark days of Chuck Austin and then the long Bendis nightmare. But his Avengers one was really cool and it got me interested in his stuff. And then when he blew up at DC, because I was always Marvel guy, but when he blew up on DC, like I had missed that boat. But I came back later, and that's when I started checking out some of his other stuff. And there's stuff of his I like. I recently was on Digging for Kryptonite talking about his Superman work that he did there, and which had some good, which kind of hit or miss for me. It had some definitely good stuff in it, but also some questionable things. Um, his Earth One Batman, I didn't care for too much. But then you get to stuff like JSA is really cool. The his Justice League work, I thought I really dug for the most part. And his Green Lantern stuff, I've only read a little bit, and I've mentioned this before that it's also kind of another one that's kind of hit or miss for me because I'm not really a Hal Jordan guy to begin with.
Mm.
But Doomsday Clock, man, I am an evangelist for Doomsday Clock. I love that book. I think it
Okay.
like go
So
ahead.
no, it's like Anthony and I did a conversation on Doomsday Clock. I've yet to review it for my show because we had planned to do a whole Watchmen thing, but I'm thinking about just revisiting it and doing a Doomsday Clock episode. Um, and I'm gonna have you on for it since you just said that because I need people who like Doomsday Clock.
Dude, yeah, I'm more than willing to do that. I did an episode back of this of the because originally this comic version was like a Patreon exclusive, and we did Doomsday Clock years ago, and it's an episode I got to re-release. But I'm always up for talking more of that. I think that's a great book, and as for the Watchmen part of it, I think that one of the reasons why I think a lot of people don't like it is because they focus so much on the Watchmen aspect of it. And I feel like and yeah, as a Watchmen sequel, it's terrible. It does not work at all as a Watchmen sequel. I will definitely give uh the naysayers that. But as a Superman story and as a meta commentary on this discussion about superhero comics and what Watchmen did to them and like the importance of Superman, I think it's got a lot of really interesting things to say, and I think it says it very well. So I'm very much a fan of that book, and especially once we get past the first half and the Watchmen stuff is kind of sort of put in the rearview mirror, and we start focusing more on the DC side of things and Superman. That's when I think it really gets interesting. I think that's the stuff that John's the most interested in, as opposed to the Watchmen stuff. Um,
And both of these are really relevant because both Three Jokers and Doomsday Clock were presented as projects that were supposed to be part of continuity. But by the time that they actually came out, they were now black label side books.
yeah,
So like we were just talking, the Three Jokers is teased in Dark Side War, which ends in early 2016. And we're going into Rebirth. Rebirth was supposed to conclude basically with Doomsday Clock because that's the whole point about uh, Dr. Manhattan messing with the timeline. But then it just, because if you look at the original artwork for Doomsday Clock, it has Superman in his costume of that time,
mhm.
more of his reborn costume. But by the time the book comes out, he's back in the trunks. It's back to the standard. And that book took almost what 2 years to come out. And then
Yeah,
Three Joke.
Batman as well. If you look at his costume, because I can't remember. I remember I think in the first part of three of Doomsday Clock, he's got this different costume from what he was wearing at the time. Like it's got the yellow emblem on, like he's wearing in Three Jokers as well. But then by the end of the book, and it's been a while since, so I may be getting the order mixed up. But by the end of the book, he's back to like more of the standard, a costume that's more like the standard DC costume at the time. So they were. I think we had this idea where I think Johns was going to have his costumes change, and that costume change was supposed to carry over the main books, and then it just never happened. So they decided to change the artwork in Doomsday Clock so it would somewhat match.
Right. And then Three Jokers didn't come out till almost the end of 2020
Mm-hmm.
when, we were for 4 years, we're waiting for this. And this was supposed to be Geoff Johns' big Joker story because he said he had not written a Joker story. And this was going to be it. And like I said, it was supposed to be in continuity, but then just doesn't. And all this to say, I think that goes into when this came out, why a lot of people were disappointed. Is because you introduce this concept of three Jokers, you tease it,
Mhm.
and as soon as you do that, you gave people 4 years to create their stories and put expectations on the book.
Yeah, and to the canonicity about it, like Johns has said that he considers it in continuity. Um, but the artist Jason Fabok, he said that he said that the canonicity is open interpretation, and he says, I'm not a continuity hound personally. I just want a good story. All my favorite stories are out of continuity, so that appeals to me more. If this was in continuity, we would have had our hands tied and forced to do certain things. And then, if I'm not mistaken, I think also Chip Zdarsky in his Batman run, he also had some reference to Three Jokers, but it was separate from what Johns had done here. So yeah, it's this weird thing where it, in a lot, it's kind of similar in some ways to X-Men First Class, where when that movie came out, nobody involved really knew whether or not it was a prequel or a reboot or some weird mix of the two, because different producers were saying different things.
Yep. It's still, I had a whole weird theory we did a couple years ago just about trying to prove how the X-Men continuity works. And you have to go some crazy places to make it work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd be very curious to see if you're able to figure out how to justify Jubilee being born in two different eras.
Oh, I did because I used the logic of the Flash movie about traveling through time, creating a fulcrum point that changes time
Oh,
both forward and backwards. And that was how I had like, okay, everything plays out this way, then you go back to this point, and then it changes it this way. Like I had it all mapped out. I'll have to see if I can find that for you. That was back in 2023
yeah.
when me and my friend did that because I was like, how are we going to make this work?
So anyway, so Three Jokers. This is this whole idea of Batman now trying to figure out solve this mystery that was introduced in Dark Side War. Although it's weird because it's not really the Dark Side War stuff is not really mentioned, and then we get to the end here, and I'm just going to jump ahead real quick because at the end, Bruce reveals to Alfred that he's always known who the Joker is, and he's just never told anyone because the wife that we saw in The Killing Joke and the baby that she was pregnant with, it turns out they didn't die in a car accident, but instead they were alive and they had been relocated to, I think it was like Alaska or something like that.
Yep.
And so the whole idea is that Bruce keeps the Joker's identity secret because if he revealed it, then that would put a target on their backs. Because like everybody from the Joker, or even like, you know, Joker's enemies or you know, families of his victims, everyone would want to target this wife and child as a result of that. So he's known all this time, which creates a interesting question. Like, well, if you knew, why are you asking the Mobius chair? But you know, then I also argue against myself because he is asking it about who killed his parents. So it could have just been another way to like test the Mobius chair or something like that. Um, but it does create this question over whether even or not even the Dark Side War stuff is in continuity with this aspect, with this story.
Do you like the idea that Batman knows Joker's true identity?
Um, Not really. I always like the idea of and personally, I'm not a fan of Joe Chill either. I'm always of the opinion that I like the idea of his parents and being like the one mystery he can never solve, and also the idea
Mm-hmm.
of the Joker being this, you know, agent of pure chaos that he can never figure out. Um, so yeah, but ultimately I land on it doesn't really matter who the Joker is. So whether or not Batman knows, I don't think I really have much of a dog in the fight, but I think if I was going to lean one way or the other, it would be more towards he doesn't know and nobody knows.
See, that's where I land because I feel like it kind of goes back to what you just said about this agent of chaos. This, like the one thing he can't solve is who killed his parents, and then there's this Joker, and it's like, oh my gosh, how do I, how do I navigate this? How do I do this? And that was something I liked about the idea of three Jokers going in. was okay, this makes sense why Batman can't figure this out. Why the Joker's always been this crazier person is it's not just been one person.
Yeah, it's a cool idea, and it does help to explain all the different versions of the Joker we've seen over the years, because the Joker's gone through as many iterations as Batman has. And Morrison had started to do this idea of exploring the more wackier side of the Batman lore, and this idea of, no, it was real, but it was this in-story explanation where he was doing like psychological experiments on himself, and that kind of, and all these like really trippy 50s sci-fi Silver Age stories, really just like him, um you know are were like a kind of psychosis type of thing, which is an interesting take on it. And I thought that worked really in a cool, different way. And so Three Jokers works in that way too, where it gives this real explanation, like, well, this is why the Joker has always been so drastically different over the decades, is because there's not just one Joker. There's a few different ones. So yeah, it's an interesting idea, like how well it's actually been utilized in the books, like either this or when Zardsky did it in his run. That part's up for debate, but it's the idea in itself is an interesting one.
And I really think that you need to have read um what do you call it? You need to have read The Killing Joke before reading these. I
Yes,
flipped it,
definitely.
and it would maybe also read the first Joker book. I'm drawing a blank on, isn't it Batman #1?
I
I'm trying to
believe so.
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I
And
agree. And also
I
Death in the Family.
I think it just really helps give some background context, especially The Killing Joke. Um, but yeah, I really think that those books would help just you enjoy this story more. So, um, the
I
Killing Joke I
had
feel is required reading, but the others,
I
um,
think yeah, I think that Killing Joke and Death in the Family are definitely required reading for this. I had never read his first appearance, but I had recently gone back and read it, and I think it was right before I did this most recent reread. I don't know if it was directly connected to this, but I decided to check it out. For some reason, I read that first appearance, and it is interesting to see how different the Joker was in that first appearance. And then when I went back and I reread Three Jokers, I really understood the criminal a lot more, and he made a lot more sense. And I really kind of saw like how John was like kind of modernizing that version. I thought that was a really interesting thing. Um, but hold on, we're gonna take a quick break though, and then we'll come back and we'll dive a little bit more into this. We all love superhero movies and TV shows, but what about the comics that inspired them? Marvel, DC, Image, and more have provided the template for the movies and shows we all enjoy watching, and it's important to honor that tradition by buying and reading comic books. Superhero Cinephiles is proud to be an affiliate of mycomicshop.com. It began as a small mail-order business operated by junior high school student Buddy Saunders all the way back in 1960, and has been operating on the internet since 1997. My Comic Shop has new releases, value packs, back issues, trade paperbacks, comic art, regular auctions, and a whole lot more, including 35% discounts on pre-orders. You can also sell your own comics or utilize their consignment services. You can even create your own want list of comics you're searching for. To get started, check out our affiliate link in the show notes or on the superherocinephiles.com homepage. And we're back. So, one of the interesting things about this is so we've got the three Jokers. So we decide to have the three heroes to face off against them. So we've got Batman, of course, but then we also have Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, and Red Hood, Jason Todd, who, of course, and this ties into the Killing Joke and Death in the Family, because obviously uh Joker killed Jason Todd and then also crippled Barbara in The Killing Joke. So that ties into those two stories and makes sense why they'd be so heavily involved in this. And while it's this idea of it being the mystery of the Jokers, but it is also a lot about this relationship between these three characters, with some questionable stuff done in there as a result. Like I think the whole Jason Barbara romance that is starts to get set up, and that little connection that Johns is working with. I didn't feel like that landed so well. I'm not sure. How did you feel about that?
I I will say that I did not like it from Barbara's point of view, but I can see it from Jason's because I always think that Jason represents a really strong way of showing someone who's just broken all around. And in some ways, I think if you look at trauma and you look at, let's say, Dick, Bruce, and Jason, I think Jason's the worst off. I
Hmm.
think Dick worked through his trauma differently and has come out more positive on the light side. And Bruce kind of falls in this middle ground. But I think Jason is so broken and so isolated because of the extent of his trauma of actually dying and everything. Um, I think that I can see where he would fall for Barbara, but Barbara's reciprocation is what's different.
Hmm.
That's what I didn't kind of gel with because it's always been, Dick and Barbara. But
Yeah.
I could see where Jason would definitely be attracted to her and uh pull towards her.
Yeah, I could buy that part. If it was more done as a one-sided thing, I think it would have landed better with me. But the way where Barbara does reciprocate to some extent didn't sit well with me. The other thing is just kind of Bruce's attitude here in this. I don't know. I felt like there's something about the way that Johns writes Batman when he's got him as the main character that doesn't sit well with me. I don't think he's got as good a handle on Batman as he does on other characters. And I think that was one of the reasons why I didn't take much to his Earth One story. I
Mm.
feel like his Bruce in here doesn't really quite work for me. I don't know how to really articulate what I'm feeling. It was just something feels off to me. I don't know. What did you think about his characterization of Bruce?
Well, throwing back to the Batman year, the Earth one, I totally get what you're saying. It didn't bother me because it was kind of a otherworldly story. It wasn't continuity.
Mhm.
Um, but here I can see that because I think Bruce comes off kind of like a dick at times,
Yeah, yeah.
and really kind of mean and aggressive, and he can become very much a know-it-all. Um, and that's kind of why I don't like the end. Like I've always known who the Joker is. It just didn't matter. Well, I mean, yeah, it kind of does, but and that so by him saying that, kind of means that there really was only one Joker that ever really mattered. If he
Hmm.
always knew who the Joker was, he always knew who one of the Jokers were. Um, but yeah.
Well, there's also this question of to who is the original Joker, because so we've got the three Jokers we have here. We have the criminal, the clown, and the comedian, right? The criminal is basically the first appearance Joker. This is the one who is much more methodical. He actually says that it actually hurts him to laugh. So throughout the entire book, he's he's like never really smiling. It's like always kind of like a frown, or like but it looks like it's like kind of like a smile is kind of tugging at the edges of his lips. It's actually really I want to talk about the Jason Fabok's art in here because it is gorgeous
Oh,
to look at.
his
Um,
art is part of why I love this story.
yeah, we'll get to the art part. I definitely want to talk more about the art and just some of the choices he made here. And then we've got the clown, who's this much more campy, colorful type. So this is much more of the Silver Age version. And this is apparently the one who killed Jason Todd and Death in the Family. He uses like elaborate pranks and stuff like that. And then we have the comedian, which is much more of the Bronze and Modern Age version. So this is like the Killing Joke version. This is when the
Mhm.
Joker had become a lot more darker and a lot more monstrous. Uh, so those are the three we're dealing with here. And to go back to what I was saying before, again, the whole idea of him saying that, he always knew who the Joker was ever since their first appearance, the comedian implies that he created the Jokers. And it's implied that he is and there's some question to it because he does say like he's like I created him or did he create me? Um so then there is the question, well, if Batman knew that who the Joker was, or who the original Joker that he fought was, then which one did he know? Did he know the criminal, or
Yeah.
did he know the comedian?
And that's my problem with I've always known who the Joker is. I prefer that this mystery was so big that it throws Bruce completely off his game. That how could I have not seen it? That I thought his psychosis, and you could have done a whole thing where how does the Joker always break out of Arkham? Because there's two other Jokers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how
There's
does like there's I think there was so much more that could have been done with this idea that throughout time it's been different Jokers interacting with Batman and the Bat family that's kept them off their game. And I think that's where the whole like I had a story in mind that is not what came to be. And my appreciation for this really comes later from looking at it more from Barbara and Jason Todd than the Joker story, and looking at it more through their trauma and healing their trauma. That's the appreciation that I came for this story after, feeling like it failed me.
mhm. Well, to that aspect too, what you're saying about the different Jokers and how he's always getting out of Arkham and all that. There's one page here, like I think it's the third issue, and it opens up with these three panels. We start off with the criminal, we see the clown, we see the comedian, and it goes through all three of them, and then it has this splash page of all these other Jokerized victims, each one having a different title, like the fisherman, the actor, the serial killer, the drifter, the city planner, the painter. And that kind of opens up this theory of, well, maybe this is this mystery that is too big to solve because there have been so many Jokers throughout the years that he can't figure out where one ends and the other begins. I think that is a cool idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is
I
something that
mean,
we've seen in other media as well. Like if I don't know if you're much of a video game guy, but in Arkham Knight, there was that whole idea of the Joker um, sending his contaminated blood and infecting other people's and trying to create a new Joker to live on.
and I guess that, I mean, that is, it works, with like that. Like Arkham Knight's a cool, I like Arkham Knight to a point, but I didn't like Arkham Knight when they just made the Arkham Knight Jason Todd.
Yeah.
Spoiler for a game that's been out for a while. Um, but like you said, like there's parts of this story as far as the Joker angles I love, but the whole like where you see all the people like coming out of the vat and the chemicals, there's like just a massive amount of Joker wannabes.
Mhm.
That's where I'm like, okay, that I could have done without. And that was in book,
I
I think I'm
think that
going
was in
through here.
book. Well, there are two versions, right? Wasn't there something like that in book two and in book three? I think there's like two.
Yeah, like book one is really good. Book two is where you have like all the Jokers like coming out of the pool, and they want to turn Jason Todd into a Joker. And that's part of the story is
Mhm.
they want to break Jason again and make him a Joker. And then of course there's someone else they want to make into a Joker to use that against Bruce.
Right. So this is where we settle on the basic thrust is that the criminal decides that the way to make a better Joker is to make it more personal to Batman. So this idea of, and he had first thought about doing Jason Todd, which is why they targeted Jason in the first place. But this eventually he settles on, okay, Joe Chill as the Joker. And this is where we get some interesting, there's he I feel like Johns is in conversation with the movies to some extent here, because I mean this there's a lot of Batman 89 DNA in this book, from the artwork, like the costume that Fabok chooses for Batman. It's basically the 89 costume, just rendered in a more comic book style. Like even the style of the belt is exactly like the 89 costume. And even like the Batmobile, it's very evocative of the 89 Batmobile, but a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
stylized.
Oh
But
yeah.
also the whole idea of the Joe Chill being the Joker, I mean, that's basically what Jack Nicholson's Joker was. He had killed Bruce's parents in that, and there's that famous exchange when they're in the roof of the cathedral, and Batman tells him, "You killed my parents. Like, you made me. I made you. You made me first." Right? There's that whole idea of it, and the whole idea of going after Jason Todd as a Joker. That was a big theory when Suicide Squad came out, the first Suicide
Yeah.
Squad movie,
Yeah.
where some people were theorizing. There's this huge fan theory that this Joker is not actually the real Joker, because there is that question of, well, if this is a Batman who is okay with killing, which he clearly is, then why wouldn't he kill the Joker? And the idea of that is because actually, instead of killing the Joker, didn't really kill Jason Todd. What he did was he had transformed him into a Joker, kind of like what happened to Tim Drake in Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. So this idea that
Mm-hmm.
the Joker we see, the Jared Leto that we see in the movies, isn't the original Joker. He's Jason Todd. He's a Jokerized Jason Todd, which I don't know. It feels like Johns is kind of commenting on those two things, the idea of Jason Todd being the Joker, or also the idea of Joe Chill being the Joker. And in both cases, it ends up being proven wrong, right? They realize that Jason Todd's not going to work as a Joker. And then in the case of Joe Chill, the comedian comes in and kills the criminal, and he basically says, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who he is, right? It doesn't matter if he's the I'm checking right now the exact page, right? He says that, it doesn't he's the clown who troubled Robin put a bullet in. All he wanted to do was laugh at the suffering of others. How common. And the criminal, that old man was so delusional. This whole big idea of creating a better Joker, well, that was lunacy now, wasn't it? A defined Joker, one with a name and identity, why that ruins the very definition of me. That's why I regret making him, or does he regret making me? Um, and he says, "This isn't a joke. There's no final twist. Not until I decide to put my hand on the knife in your heart. The criminal was wrong. I am chaos. I am the devil. I am nothing to you and everything. It isn't the Joker that is broken. It was the Batman. Broken by a pain greater than anything I could ever do to you. So I convinced them that Joe Chill would be the perfect brand spanking new clown prince of crime, the man who sent Gotham to hell. He bought it, and I let it all play out just like I knew it would. You saved the man who killed Thomas and Martha Wayne, who sent Gotham and you spiraling into the drain of despair. You saw the old, regretful, sad sack Chills become. You felt his pain, and it gave relief to yours. I healed your greatest wound, so now I can be your greatest pain. Me. I'll cut you. I'll hurt you. I'll keep twisting that knife until the day we both die together. So I think that is really kind of like in Doomsday Clock, where Johns is having this kind of meta discussion with Watchmen and kind of
Mm-hmm.
the effect it's had on superhero comics. I feel like he's having the same discussion here with the different Batman adaptations, and kind of this idea of, no, you don't have to personalize the Joker to Batman. It's just the Joker is always a reflection of Batman. It doesn't have to have that personal connection.
Yeah. And I guess let me ask you this to kind of to tie back into this. How did you feel about the Joker being the one in Batman 89 that killed Bruce's parents?
I mean, you see, it's hard for me to say that because I saw Batman 89 when I was so young that it was so impactful to my conception of Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'll say that when I was young, I saw it when I was like, probably the first time I saw it was I had to have been at most 5 years old, maybe six. Um, but that first time I saw it, I didn't actually clue into the fact that he was the one who killed the parents. Like I just didn't realize that at first. And it wasn't until later, after a few viewings, that I'm like, oh yeah, I see, he killed his parents. And I just always kind of wrote it off as it just being an aspect of that movie, just like the whole fact that he has a name and a background as well. And so I
Mm.
just always just put it to the side, just be like, oh, well, that's just the 89 version. So it doesn't really matter too much. Um, but in principle, I don't like the idea of the Joker having a name or having some personal connection to Batman in that way, to Bruce Wayne in that way.
And I fall into the same camp because I like the Joker being part of that mystery that I can't figure out.
And
Um,
the Joker
and
too, more than any other of Batman's villains, really adapts to whatever version of Batman he's facing off against. So the original one, that Batman was much more of a pulpy hero, so the Joker was much more of a criminal mastermind. The Silver Age version, Batman had gone to a lot more campy territories. That's where we get the whole, the Joker's boners and all those kinds of jokes and that kind
yeah,
of stuff. The really kind of like, the Cesar Romero style Joker. And then when we get into the 70s and we start moving into the late Silver Age and the Bronze Age when O'Neill and Adams were working on the book, then we get a Joker who is a lot darker, but still is very much in kind of like that superhero mode. So that's very much like the Mark Hamill Joker, right? The Batman the animated series version of the Joker is kind of what I like in that one too. And then when we get into the Bronze Age and the modern age, that's when we get like the very, I guess the best comparison would be the Heath Ledger Joker, where it's, much more about just chaos and death and destruction. And just kind of like the whole idea of like life being a joke to him. Just as
and
that Batman gets a bit much darker as well.
and I think that's was like when people talked about the three Jokers, they pulled a lot from the movie references because you had distinctively different Jokers. Um, and I think that is why when we did this, like we wanted more of that distinction of who these three were and what it really meant.
And then I wonder too, like how much of this story Johns actually had in mind when he had first had this idea in Darkseid War, because I don't know about you, like and it's not that this is a bad story. Like I think it's actually a pretty well written story, and I have some quibbles here and there with some aspects of it, like Bruce's characterization or the whole Barbara Jason thing. But the story itself, as a story in itself, it is well written, it is well executed, it does work. But I think ultimately, just I kind of don't feel within the world of the story like that this question of the three Jokers, that it really had a satisfactory payoff.
That is my all-time thing is if you take that out and look at it as if the Joker almost as if the one Joker is the comedian. That's the main Joker. That's the Joker that matters. And the other two were just pawns of his that he used. But you really look at the story more through Jason and Barbara, through their trauma that the Joker did to them. I think that's the story. I think that's where I found more enjoyment out of. Um, because like you said, the satisfactory of that there's three Jokers doesn't really matter because Batman plays I already know who the Joker is. I know who the Joker
Mm-hmm.
was. And then we see that final panel in book 3, that final page where Bruce is there. Um um
When he
we
finds them
see
in Alaska.
yeah, he checks on the child and the wife, the and so and he reveals how they pulled the switch and everything that played out in um the Killing Joke. But
Mm-hmm.
then okay, so did you read Joker the World?
No.
Okay, I meant to tell you this before. There is the first story, and that is an 8-page story. Okay. That is like a sequel to this because it's the Joker showing up at the town in Alaska and coming in the diner where the wife and child are, and he interacts with them, but then has like no knowledge and no recognize of who they actually are.
Okay. I'll have to check that out because yeah, I've never looked at that. So I'll have to look into that. Um that sounds interesting. But also there's this other idea here, and this kind of goes against the Killing Joke to an extent, which I wasn't so fond of this. This idea that um when we're in that last scene in Alaska when he's talking to Alfred and we're seeing the flashbacks and the wife says he'll never let me leave him and my child I can't bear to think what he'll do to the baby. It's okay, lady, the boys pulled together some money, we'll help you however we can. Um, so this idea of she was so scared of him that she faked his death, that kind of, because the whole thing about the Killing Joke was that what transformed him, this guy, into the Joker was the fact that it was this, he had gotten himself in too deep and then he ended up going over the edge. He had this one bad day where his, he was going to go on this crime and be this patsy for the Red Hood gang so that he could get money to take care of his wife and his unborn baby. And then right before the crime's going to go down, he's told that his wife died in a car accident. And then he tells the gang that he doesn't need to do it anymore. And they say, "Oh no, you're still doing it." Then he goes in and he does it, and then he falls into the chemicals. And so that whole idea of the one bad day transformed him into the Joker and made him snap and go crazy. That is erased by this last page, which I didn't really like that aspect of it.
Right. Right. And it just makes you go like, what do you really get it? Because when I first read The Killing Joke, first of all, I'm a person who's a sucker for backstories, like the origin of things. So when I first read The Killing Joke, the whole idea about this is Joker's history, this is who he is, and then the ambiguousness of, well, it could have happened that way. Sometimes I remember that way. So with the Joker being this unreliable narrator that's revealed to us in The Killing Joke, it really makes the story that we just read, does it matter? Does it not matter? It's a way it could have happened. It was just a fiction, fun story. Because yes, all of these stories are fiction. But like when we take things to canon, we're trying to say that this is the real story of this character. So what John seems to be doing here is he's saying that story counts, but what the Joker may have told you in that story is not really how it was. It really happened more this way, where the story that he's recounting or remembering or whatever that's being conveyed to us is more of a sympathetic story compared to the person he was. But then it breaks, like what you said about the one bad day, which is the big crux. Because even we just had that whole run of books a couple years back called One Bad Day, where like each one of Batman's major villains is supposed to experience their one bad day of what broke them into villainy.
Right. Yeah, and another thing it does too is it also breaks that multiple choice aspect, right? Which I thought that and over time my opinion on the Dark Knight movie has cooled. But one of the things that I really still like about it is how they did find ways to incorporate that multiple choice aspect of it when,
Yep.
Every time the Joker talks about how he got his scars, it's a different story. And ultimately, even when he tries to tell Batman at the end, Batman just doesn't care. He doesn't even listen to him. And he just says,
Exactly.
"No, I know how you got these instead." And that by doing this, like not only does John ruin that whole one bad day aspect, but he also takes out the multiple choice aspect because now we have a definitive answer that's not from the Joker's perspective; it's from Batman's perspective, and so now that's a perspective that we can trust, which takes that away because the whole thing about the Killing Joke that Moore did so masterfully. I mean, and I've got issues with the Killing Joke as well, but one of the things I thought he did really well in that was how he gives us this whole sympathetic backstory in the Joker, and then at the end he tosses it all into question, and we're left to wonder: wait, all this stuff that we read about the Joker's backstory, was that real or not?
And I think that is where you have to respect the writer for the story they're telling and not being the story that you want.
Mhm.
Because you can either love what he just did or hate it, because it feels like you kind of got tricked, um, suckered, or whatever. So you can either go with it and accept, oh, this is what's really going on, or, you know, hate it. And I think in The Killing Joke is you're sitting down and you're reading a story. And you're reading a story that you it's not, it's a one and done book that really had no build up. For most of us, we're all reading it a long time after the fact.
Mhm.
Um, Three Jokers was teased for 4 years. Um, so we all had a chance to build up the story that we want. Not being so if someone just read this in a vacuum, like my wife's not here, but she read it, she would have a different take on it. And she's a big Joker fan.
Mhm.
Um, and I say that even for, recently Stranger Things ended and people did not like the ambiguousness of the ending. And I'll say that that's because people had time to build up what the finale should be and was able to put their own imprint on it. But when you're just given something, it's like the Star Wars sequels or prequels, you know?
Mhm.
When I watched as a child, when I watched the Star Wars trilogy, I watched the first movie when it was over, I watched the second, and I watched the third. I didn't have time to build up what I think was going to happen or my own canon or my own desires. I just took everything and then accepted it for what it was.
Right.
And I think that in this book, in some ways, is trying to do the opposite of what more created by, okay, the ambiguousness and everything that was in that book. No, I'm making a finite decision. This is what it truly is, putting my foot down, and this is how it really happened. This is who it really was. There's no interpretation. And I think that it kind of leaves us a little, it leaves us like, oh, okay, you either love it or you don't.
Mhm.
And if you if you read this book for the Joker, I think you get less out of it. But if you read it for what's being done to uh, Jason and Barbara, I think you get a different perspective.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I think that's all well said. And the thing about the expectations too, because even when you go back to the Killing Joke, like my understanding, and I could be wrong about this, my understanding was there wasn't really an expectation that that was going to be in continuity in the first place. And then there's some question about that, and it wasn't until uh Ostrander Suicide Squad and he introduced Oracle and that it was firmly established that then okay, Killing Joke is officially canon now. Um,
Yeah,
and there is, also Grant. I'm sure you've heard Grant Morrison's theory that the Killing Joke actually ends with Batman killing the Joker.
yeah. And once again, like I respect Morrison as a writer. I don't always agree with his takes on things. Um, but I think there is an argument for, Batman killing the Joker at the end of that, if that's where you want to see it. Uh, I didn't interpret it that way till he pointed it out, and then I see, okay. And I think that's where once again, it's ambiguous in that
Mm-hmm.
story. That's more wrote the story with this of, could it be when Batman kills the Joker? What's this Joker's true origin? Look what the Joker did. Did it break Batman? Um, but then when you make Oracle and you make Barbara Oracle, it you you don't really do a different story. You kind of just jump off the Killing Joke of this is how she got there.
Hmm. Yeah.
Did
So,
Were you a Power
uh,
Rangers watcher?
oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Do
At
you
least up until
remember?
Zeo.
Okay, cool. So you'll get this. Um, how it's kind of like this is they did it. Power Rangers the movie came out, and then the show had to do those powers, costumes, and Zords their own way. And instead of using the movie, they did a whole different storyline so that they could end up with the same Zords that they had in the movie.
That annoyed the crap out of me when that
So
happened.
they introduced Ninjor and everything, and they really just made the movie outside of kind of continuity, but yet they piggybacked on what that was into the series. And that's kind of, I think, with Barbara as Oracle, is
Hmm.
they cherry picked what they wanted to use from the Killing Joke to put it in continuity, but didn't really accept the whole
Hmm.
uh so
Yeah,
of the
yeah. I
story.
feel, yeah, it's the weird thing about the Killing Joke, and is that they will do that. Um, and they do this with lots of continuity stuff these days. They just kind of like pick and choose the stuff that's part of it and part and not.
Yeah, it's like what works, what's easy, what I like, and then what I don't like.
And the last thing I wanted to talk about here, because we're close to getting the end of the Zoom time limit here. So, but one of the things I also wanted to quickly mention is just talking about a little bit about Fabok's art. So we talked about the influences that the movies obviously had on his depiction of Batman and the costume, the Batmobile, and all that. But my God, this guy's just such a phenomenal artist. Like these opening pages when we see Bruce coming back in, and just you know, Alfred peeling the suit off, and just like the map of scars all over his body, and just these all how each scar is a memory. So we get like the big scar in his back, and then we see Bane breaking his back. We see a time when the Riddler burned him with his staff. Another time when Catwoman cut him. We see Croc, Scarecrow, and these bullet wounds from the Joker. Several attacks from the Joker, in fact. So just this, it's I think if I was reading this in the comic book in a single issue, I think I would have been annoyed by all the textless pages. But when you're reading it in one whole volume like this, it flows a little bit better.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I'm looking at like I have the original releases, like the three individual issues. They're pristine larger issues, so they're not just your standard comic book, pages. There's more, so they're deluxe or whatever. So it works. And this is one I wouldn't mind having a trade of just to have it all together because I feel that it works reading a trade better. But
Hmm.
Fabok's art in anything just automatically elevates the story. Like when he was working on Justice League and everything, I loved it. And and I think another thing that separates this is his Jason Todd design and everything is different than the Jason Todd we had in the comics
Hmm.
at the time and after. This Batgirl is kind of standardized Batgirl. Um, there's nothing really super different about Batgirl. Her suit is pretty much what we have seen in comics. It's a Batgirl suit. It wasn't too different than the new 52 suit, other than it was less armored looking.
Hmm.
But Jason's whole look was a little bit different. It's a very much his own kind of Jason style.
Yeah, it's incorporating more of the Robin iconography into like the tunic and all that, which I really dug that as well.
I did too
Uh,
because it makes Jason feel more part of things.
mhm.
Even the way his red
um,
hood helmet is.
yeah, and the fact that he actually has a red hood, which always annoys me when they never have a hood for the red hood. In his designs. It's just the helmet. So I did like that aspect of it too. But also the Jokers, right? The way even though they dress the same, they're just like he's able to have like this slight differentiation. Like I mentioned the fact about the criminal and how he's like never really quite smiling. It's always kind of like this forced smile. Whereas and the other two, the comedian and the clown, they look pretty similar, but they're just like some subtle ways that he's able to draw them distinctively.
And that is one thing that made me frustrated was in some of the pages, you're not sure which one is which because especially between the comedian and the clown, by having them similar but really up close, like in the
Mm.
art. But the criminal, I um
The criminal
I
depiction is
like.
just aces. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm looking
Uh,
through the art here. I just even the format, like with the 9-panel grid used a lot, very much like Doomsday Clock.
right. Yeah. Well, that's something we should definitely put some time on to talk about that another time. But before
Yes.
we run out of time here, why don't you remind people where they can find you?
Anywhere you watch or listen to podcasts, you can find Krypton Report. We're on all podcast network platforms and YouTube.
And as for us, superherocinephiles.com is the website. We are superherocinephiles.com on Blue Sky, Super Cinema Pod on any others. And thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Superhero Cinephiles is produced by me, Percival Constantine. The show is created by myself and the late, great Derek Ferguson, our host emeritus. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com to listen to past episodes or find out how you can be a guest yourself. Support the show by visiting our advertiser links or click the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website to make a one-time donation. We are Super Cinema Pod on both Instagram and Blue Sky, so please be sure to follow us. We'd also appreciate it if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and share us with your friends.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.